Hi, and thanks for tuning in. This is the Learn with John Eick podcast, and it is day, what is it, 109? 109 on my 180-day drive to school. That is a lot of days right there, and I gotta tell you, I'm halfway through this podcast I'm listening to, and it is really hard to wrap my brain around what it's telling me. It's telling me like that game theory relates to how we see the world, and I think what I'll do is finish listening to the podcast and come back on here and talk to you about what it is I think I know about that podcast, because my brain is bubbling on it. Now, last week I was talking about this podcast dude named Jocko, and Jocko said, you know, the whole world's a game. You got to figure out what game you're playing. You know, the whole story about like, hey, fish, how's the water? And the fish says, what's water? Like, you don't know you're in a game until you recognize the game that you're playing. Okay, check. So I tell that story to this dude who's super smart, and he turns me on to this other podcast where this guy, Ezra something or other, is interviewing this guy who's this expert philosopher in game theory. Okay, so clearly I'm going down this rabbit hole now, but I'll go finish the podcast and I'll come back and I'll tell you what I think I know about it. But you know, this game theorist, this guy who says, hey, look, games are an art form, and whereas a painting is a visual art form, and a music is a auditory art form, a game is an experiential form of art. Well, why? Well, because I think when we look at a piece of art, it's a painting. You know, it's this suspension of belief in where we currently exist, and you fall into the reality of the painting visually. And same thing with music. I mean, we're surrounded by soundscapes all the time, but we fall into the reality of the music, and it changes our perspectives. But the game creates an experience where the philosopher says the entire point of engaging as a game is to purposely place obstacles in front of oneself to arrive at a place that you could have gotten to more easily had you not adhered to the rules of the obstacles, which is so true about all of our lives too, though, right? Like, what is it that we complicate and place obstacles in front of ourselves where we could have gotten to somewhere more easily? And it just makes my brain bubble on all kinds of thoughts. Now, again, I'll go listen to the podcast and come back. What I wanted to talk about today, though, was just the beginning part of this podcast I listened to. These guys are talking about game theory. They're talking about points and why points matter, and how points actually shape the way we think about our experiences. Now, stay with me. I know you're probably like, John, you're halfway to school. You made no sense yet. Listen, it's going somewhere in the edu world if you're an educator, because this game theorist says, look, the way we create games is by placing value on certain maneuvers, and those values then those maneuvers obtain points. Those points have some value. It goes back to measure what matters. Okay, check. But then this guy in this podcast goes down the rabbit hole because he's from academia, and he goes, yeah, it's kind of like grading. And I was like, oh, push pause. I want to listen with both ears, right? And this guy says, yeah, actually, I'm from UC Santa Cruz, and that's my alma mater. And that's actually my alma mater, too. So I was really listening. And he goes, look, if I'm grading 3 students, and I could write a narrative about each student, and it's in an ethics class. One of the students is studying ethics because he's going to become a computer software programmer. One of the students is studying ethics because they're going to go into the medical industry, and one of them is studying ethics because they're going into law. And all 3 of them have totally different applications for that which is being learned in class, and so they should have totally different grading systems, because they're like, hey, as it applies to the place that this person's going to take it, this person has a fundamental understanding of ethics. This person over here has a different understanding of ethics, and it's going to be applied in a different way, and so really they deserve a different narrative, a personalized package that speaks to their form of mastery in the manner in which that they plan to apply what is learned. The problem is that's super messy, because we look at information as an opportunity to become condensed into a packet of information. So why do we have grades? Well, because if a student goes to my ethics class and gets a B and then transfers to your institution, you're like, oh, yeah, I get it. You're a B. Yeah, I can transfer that packet of information. I can make that information, usable. And they reference this book called See is the State. Like see through the eyes of the state, like the state being a bureaucracy, a government. And what it says is, like, for these big bureaucracies, they can only see you, the human being, in relationship to that which they can produce. So Amazon sees us as human beings really only as consumers, as what can be measured. Did you buy something from us at Amazon, or are you selling something to us at Amazon, or are you helping us buy or sell things as Amazon? Amazon can only see you as a buyer, a seller, a contributor to the buying and selling, because that's what they do. The state can only see you through the packets of information, that which it creates. Well, that becomes a little bit of a problem if you see the world of education as a bureaucracy, which we know that it is. It's a multi-billion-dollar bureaucracy just here in the state of California. So what are we producing, and what packets of information are we utilizing to describe the value of the people in the institutions? Well, that is, I don't know if we got time for this podcast, or if it even makes sense coming out of my brain basket into these airwaves. But in my mind, it's starting to rattle around like, okay, we could break this down a couple different ways. We can certainly break it down on the student side and break it down on the staff side. But let's break it down on the student side real quick. We know there's a bunch of great reasons. Go read the book, Rethinking Grading, or Grading for Equity. And what it says is, like, you couple that with that cool TED Talk called, what the heck's that? The Myth of Average. And it says that nobody's average. There's no average, right? We have this jagged profile. And then go look it up. The jagged profile diagram is really cool. What it says is, me, John Eick, as a student, I'm going to be linguistically strong, but I'm going to be like conceptually weak, or I'm going to be grammatically incorrect, but idea heavy. Like, okay, hey, this John Eick student needs to strengthen up over here and is doing well over here. But if you average that all together, sounds like a B. So we put that B on John, and we say that's John's packet of information, so John becomes transferable within the organization. Problem is, like, you've overlooked, like, I might have a really special talent for, something, for improvisational communications tactics. Like, but if you boil me down to a B and give me that B, and I transfer my B to college, they're like, yep, here comes a B. But what they've missed is, like, the brilliance that is me. Whereas the narrative evaluation, which I get is like virtually impossible in these bureaucratic scenarios, the narrative evaluation would be like, hey, this guy's not great with grammar and he's often late with his work. But you know what? He's got this one superhuman strength, and it is X. And then when I go to transfer, if somebody would read that narrative about me, they'd be like, dude, this guy seems pretty, average, except for this one thing he's got going for him. I like to see that one thing, So if the state can only see us based on the information that the state produces, and we in education are the state, we gotta be pretty, like, look, what kind of information are we producing? Like, what is it? Like, what are we doing in the way that we think about grading and trying to make it quantitative and standardized and numeric and measurable and, chartable? And what are we doing with all of that to the psyches of our students? Because what we're saying is, you're engaged in a game. And the game is point acquisition. And we designed the game to create these standardized measurements so that we can actually collect and transfer little packets of information that represent you, the student. And that, to me, is, just not at the heart of what I think we're trying to do. So, I don't know how we break that. I'm in the parking lot now. I'm going to go back and listen to this to make sure it made even some sense. In my brain, it's bubbling. Outside, it may be a little loose. Hey, look, my name is John Eick. You can find me on the Twitters. Thanks for listening to the show. I'm just throwing out ideas as they bubble across my brain, and you help me kind of bring the world into focus by allowing me to talk out loud. So thanks for listening. Reach out to me on the Twitters. Hit me on the emails. Let's talk about this. I'm going to go listen to the rest of that podcast. And then I will come back and let you know if I'm even making sense to myself. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.